Good to go. Oh, so good morning again, everybody. We'll start the official meeting now, and want to welcome everybody to the second quarter 2024 Broadband Advisory Council meeting. I'm here live in Columbia with my co-chair. So, Anna, thank you so much for joining and your participation along the way. And let's do some introductions. I guess we'll start here in the room. Mike, you want to?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Mike Hertzberg, I'm the Deputy Director here for the South Carolina Broadband Office.
Hey friends, Mary Del Hayes, and I am on the digital equity side.
I'm Anna Berger. I'm with the South Carolina Association of Counties, and very honored to be a part of this.
Cedric, Senior Director of Broadband Infrastructure. Glad to be here today, too.
Yep, and let's see, on the line, I can see Tom. We'll get you to say hi.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Tom Allen, Chief Technology Officer at the Office of Regulatory Staff. I am calling in from rainy Greenville today. The Wi-Fi connection is not very good, so if I break off, I'm going to call in on my phone. So I will be there, just maybe some lag here.
And Rebecca?
Yeah, hi, I'm Rebecca Gunlodson. I am with the South Carolina Department of Education, and I'm in the role of Chief of Staff.
And Bernie?
Bernie Mazik, President and CEO of the South Carolina Association for Community Economic Development, better known as SCASED.
Susie?
Good morning, Susie Shannon, President, CEO, South Carolina Council on Competitiveness, and we just shortened it SC Competes these days. Thank you.
Amy Marshall?
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy Marshall. I'm the finance manager here at the ORS that handles all these monies.
That's great. Chris Bailey?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Chris Bailey, Senior Director of State Government Affairs for Spectrum by Charter Communications. I apologize I can't be there in person with you this morning. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm glad we're able to do this virtually so I don't get anybody else sick. But glad to be here today.
Thanks for joining, Chris. I feel better. James Tanis?
Good morning, James Tanis here, Senior Data Scientist for the Broadband Office.
Quite a crew. Okay, well, thank you all for joining. I'm going to go ahead and...
Couple more here.
Oh, did we have some more? Yeah. Okay, Chadwick, I'm not sure if he's able to speak because he's not a panelist, is he? Or you can unmute him. There we go. Chad,
FPO for NTIA for BEAD and digital equity in the state of South Carolina. Happy to be here. Wish I could be in Columbia today, but duties of the service call.
Thanks for joining, Chad. And then we also have from the broadband team, Angelica Petch. And you want to say hi, Angelica? And then and Michael Borowski.
Area specialist.
Hey, thanks for joining, Angelica, and then Michael as well. So great. Okay, appreciate it, everybody. I'm going to try to share my slides real quick. Hopefully it's coming up. And then we'll get this rocking and rolling. We got it. Okay. So we just skipping or going through our agenda really quick. There's really two parts of this meeting. We did our introductions and kind of going around. We want to give an update on the investments that have occurred on the infrastructure side, and we're going to talk about digital opportunity. And if we have some remaining time, Susie, we'd love to circle back to you and Rebecca and others that are on the call, just getting some updates from and Anna, of course, things that are going on in your worlds for the greater good. But this is kind of a fun call because if you remember in our last meeting, I was telegraphing a weight shift for the Broadband Advisory Council. I like to share it like that because when you think of an athlete shifting from their left foot to the right foot, I've always described broadband in that terms in South Carolina because we've had to have our weight heavy on the left side, if you want to use that analogy, or we had to get infrastructure done, because without getting the infrastructure right, talking about a lot of other stuff is kind of a waste of time. So we knew that that was our strategic goal number one. But we've always envisioned over time that our weight would naturally shift to our right foot. And that's when we bring in the world of digital opportunity. So the infrastructure without the skills to use it, without having it affordable, doesn't make any sense either. But we're at that really cool time when our weight is shifting intentionally. And with a lot of success on the infrastructure side, we're able to shift very thoughtfully. And that's why I'm thankful for Tom and Mary Dell to take over and lean on this digital opportunity stuff. But that's kind of our theme today, is taking a look at the weight shift. I want to spend the first part of this meeting kind of giving a recap on the infrastructure world. And I'm going to try to do a graceful behind the back pass to Tom, and we'll pick up on the digital equity side. But speaking first on the infrastructure side, done a lot of thinking about the last couple of years in the broadband office and reflecting on really starting from next to nothing, growing very rapidly. First and foremost, talking about the team we've cobbled together, which is a pretty extraordinary group of folks. We have had and still have a big mission. There's still a lot of work to be done, but this little humble team of full-time broadband folks, and we're nested within an agency that we pull a lot of part-time resources and some shared resources from the rest of the agency. We're blessed to be surrounded by a legal team. We're blessed to be surrounded by a finance team, and we leverage that in big ways. Sometimes they hate us, but because the load gets heavy, right, Amy? Amy and Georgianne. But it's really been, when you think back on how far we've come in such a short period of time, it really is pretty extraordinary. And quite candidly, there aren't many state agencies that can go from $30 million to $1 billion in 2 years and be able to deal with it. So talk a little more about that. But also want to brag a little on the little broadband office team. Is we've had in 2023, we had some very special awards. Some of you may have heard of it before. There's Special Achievement and GIS Award that Esri gives out. There's only 200 of these given out globally. And to have the broadband office get one of those was a really big deal. Also, the South Carolina Information Technology Directors recognized us last year for their Innovation Award. And that was a really big deal, too, to have your peers that are running state IT to recognize you. It was a really meaningful thing. So very grateful for this team. True powerhouses, bragging not just in the state, but I think nationally, our broadband office will rank in the top 3 to 5 in the U.S. There's not any question about it. The rate we're going. But talking about money, just to put this into perspective, some of you have seen this chart before, but I was reflecting on it last night as I was flipping through the slides. But I came to ORS in March of 2021. And the broadband office didn't exist then. And I inherited the top right of this slide. You can see the $30 million. I inherited the $30 million grant program, but then we quickly had to build a team around that to take it going. But I mean, the agency got the battle. I like to say the battlefield promotion to take on broadband in the middle of the pandemic, and we actually ORS deployed 16.7 million in the middle of the pandemic, and that's part of a $50 million allocation. The reason it's not a full 50 is you only had 90 days to get it done. And so the balance that could not be deployed was returned back to the general coffers to do the unemployment trust fund and things like that. But it's crazy to me that we went from July 2021 with a $30 million budget, and Quickly thereafter, in May of 2022, the General Assembly allocated $400 million to the broadband office. And then more recently, on June 26th, less than 2 years, the federal government allocated another $551 million to South Carolina. So truly, our budget has gone over $1 billion in less than 2 years. And we're nowhere close to deploying it all yet. We're still working through some things. But I wanted to just kind of set the stage, understanding the amount of money. I'm gonna focus in on, you see this 214 and the 185 on the slide. Those add together. That constitutes the dollars that were allocated to the broadband office in May of 2022. And some of you, this is a slide from the past, but I kind of wanted to refresh everybody's memory. May of 2022, the General Assembly allocated $400 million. It consisted of state fiscal recovery fund, about $214 million, and approximately $186 million of capital projects fund. And those are two separate budget buckets within ARPA. So you're going to hear us talking about ARPA quite a bit, but just talking about that. The capital projects fund is not as well known. It's really only known in broadband circles, and that's because it's a broadband only fund. The state fiscal recovery fund is more well known in state government because the state got over $2 billion. All counties got their own allocation of state fiscal, and all municipalities got their own allocation. In fact, Rebecca, I think the Department of Ed got some piece parts of the American Rescue Plan. So everybody's familiar with SFRF, but the Capital Projects Fund's a different story, and Treasury had a special separate application that we had to remember. We had to separately apply for those funds and had to come up with a project plan. So we knew we were going to use it for broadband, but we came up with a special theme for the Capital Projects Fund. And that special theme was we wanted to invest strategically in the Main Street communities in South Carolina. And it's not just the Main Street itself, it's the whole municipality. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but that was a very strategic effort. You know, for those of you who lived in South Carolina a long time, you know, it's been heartbreaking to me. I've traveled all over the state personally, but you know, to drive through a Main Street and see many of the storefronts with boarded up, you know, lack of activity, and you know, as an engineer, just kind of reflecting on what's missing on those main streets. Well, they need some population, of course, but they also need digital infrastructure. And without it, you can't really survive in the 21st century. So we had it a very strategic part of our mission to get the main streets done. And I'm happy to share some good news on that in a minute. One of the other things we did very strategically, which I think looking backwards is probably the smartest thing we did, is, you know, the General Assembly allocated $400 million to the broadband office, but we decided we're not going to give it all away at once. We're never giving it away, it's a bad word, but we're not going to commit it all at once. We felt that we were better off breaking up the big pot of dollars into smaller tranches and mapping all the time. So we map and then we invest, and we map and then we invest. That's what this slide is all about. It's just the rapid iteration, and quite candidly, this is a lesson stolen from the software development world of Agile, if you know that word. But instead of doing the big build and hoping it works at the end, you do it in bite-sized chunks. And that has served us very, very well, especially from an engineering perspective over the last couple of years. So I talked about Main Streets. I hope you all caught the press release we did on January 31st, where we announced that we made the final 2 investments in Main Streets in South Carolina. And you say, well, heck, why did you only invest in 2 Main Streets? And believe it or not, that's because we did an in-depth GIS analysis. There were only 2 Main Street municipal areas in the whole state of South Carolina that did not have an investment already. There were only 2 left. So we invested in both Ridge Spring and Norway, Cedric now, and These were done through a competitive grant award. I want to make sure everybody knows that. Both Ridge Spring and Norway were put out there for public bid, and Charter came in with the low bid on both communities. And we just held kickoff events in Ridge Spring and Norway. And these were wonderful events, by the way. I mean, in Ridge Spring, they actually did an Easter egg hunt for the kids. And in the lower right-hand corner, you can see the setup. Chris, you're on the call. Thank you for leaning in so much. But you all can see this was quite a kickoff event in little old Ridge Spring. The kids did the Easter egg hunt, and they got the golden eggs. And Cedric, I think your son actually won the golden egg in the Easter egg hunt. Really fun. And then we did another kickoff event in Norway. So both of those just happened in the last couple of weeks, and they were very, very well received. The mayors are leaning in on this, and it's a really big thing. Both of these projects, by the way, this is not just the Main Street. We're calling it Main Street. Every single resident in these municipalities is getting fiber to the home. Everybody that didn't have it. So these are really extraordinary transformational investments for those people. I'm sorry, was there a question? And we're also, I want to do a special shout out to our other BBAC member. I know they're both consumed right at the minute, but the Municipal Association has leaned in with their Main Street program, and both Main Streets have strategic planning efforts underway. And you'll note the date that those are both kicking off. It's right now. So I had invited Jenna, who runs the Main Street program, to be with us today, but she said, Jim, guess what? We're doing kickoffs in both Norway and Ridge Spring this morning, or today. One's at 9 a.m. In Ridge Spring and 1 o'clock in Norway. So this is really important. And this is really reflective of the fact that it's not just about the infrastructure. It's about doing all the strategic planning and lifting up those communities. And I know, both mayors are extraordinarily excited about these projects, and they've brought in community teams to work around and really figure out how they're going to lift up their communities and wrap around that digital infrastructure in a really cool way. And, Rebecca and others on this call, I would invite you to think about how you might lean in on these two projects, and how they might be, how could Department of Ed do something special on top of this? Because both of these will be done. Chris Bailey, I know the charter team is fully committed on having these two communities fully constructed by Christmas this year. So, which is a really cool thing. And, you think from a K-12 education perspective, what can you do on top of that infrastructure once everybody's got it? Economic development, what can we do on top of that once everybody's got it? Healthcare, can go on and on and on. So these are a big deal for the Main Streets, and I think it's going to pay off in a big way. So the next announcement we made was we completed our Capital Projects Fund investment round. So the $185.1 million is now fully committed, and we have that out the door with investments. And also we did 4 in the month of March. Was really crazy, but we did 4 kickoff events. Upcountry Fiber did a kickoff event in Anderson County on March 6th. Lumos did a kickoff event in Spartanburg County. Upcountry Fiber again in Pickens County. And then Home Telecom did one in Berkeley, Dorchester. So these kickoff events are really important. These are 2-year projects. These are all slated to finish in December of 2025. But getting the community aware that these investments are being made is a really cool deal. But you can see how much celebration has been going on. This is a special shout out, to my team that pulled off what we call the Accelerated Deployment Grant. And the General Assembly, not a lot of people are aware, but if you kind of go back in time, you remember American Rescue Plan dollars were actually committed to the state of South Carolina on March 15th, 2021. The General Assembly did not allocate money to the broadband office until May of 2022. So the General Assembly, however, wanted us to take care of projects that have been constructed prior to the funds being allocated. So we had a full grant round, again, competitive. 10 different ISPs representing 23 counties of construction came in and applied for this program, and we just got it done yesterday. And we have been awarding these. It took an incredible amount of effort, especially on our finance team. But, you know, to look backwards on projects that were done and then try to fold them into a federal framework after the fact, I think if we had it all to do again, we probably would not have done this. But Amy, I definitely want to do a shout out for you and the finance team. You know, congrats on pulling this off. But you all, there's over 24 million, so $24,063,566 of SLFRF funds were committed to this. But you all, this constructed 19,341 broadband serviceable locations and over 2,000 miles of fiber. So it was a really big deal. And all of these projects are done, operational. They had to be done for this program, and they had to be operational by June 30, 2022. So it was built in advance. And what we're doing is just kind of reimbursing them after the fact for work that had already been done. But it's important to note as well, they had a lot of skin in the game. These are 50-50 projects. So for every dollar we put in, the broadband provider also had to put in a dollar. So this is recognizing close to $50 million of capital investment in the state of South Carolina. It's a really big deal. So Amy, again, thanks. Mike, James, Angelica, everybody that really leaned. This was really, really hard technically, but also financially to do that audit. So now let's lean into exciting times. We are, if you do all the math, we have a little less than $40 million, between 35 and 40 million left of our SLFRF money to get it committed. And I want to refresh everybody's memory a little bit on this thing we call priority areas, because we've affectionately, Chris, I'm laughing at you on this one, but we've taught all of our internet service providers how to play Pac-Man once again. So you all remember growing up, hopefully you played that video game where you chase the cherries and you have your Pac-Man gobble up as many cherries. That has been our philosophy with awarding grant money. And when you realize that you have the ability to put the cherries on the map where you want them, you can achieve the goals and objectives of your grant program. So the General Assembly told us that we need to prioritize K-12 student households, difficult development areas. These are the classic low-income areas in South Carolina, and also places where there's no internet service provider. So guess what? That's where we put the cherries. And Chris, this is how we get you guys to play Pac-Man, right? So
playing Pac-Man. Thank you so much. That's such a great analogy, Jim.
And it's worked. And so this is the map that we produced. I want to talk to this a little bit. Again, you can see where the cherries are. Those dark red areas on the map, these are the places where we wanted our ISPs to go and to achieve results. And Rebecca, this is a little bit of a refresher for you, but we have worked so well with Department of Ed, and thank you for leaning in. Department of Education actually gave us detailed street addresses for over 785,000 public school students. So guess what we did? We mapped them all. And we know where there's internet service and where there's not. And Rebecca, that's how we prioritize the census blocks. And, you know, all of our ISPs, when they apply for our remaining ARPA grant funds, and Mike and everybody else has been leading the charge on this, your grant does not qualify for a program unless you take at least one priority area off the table. It's mandatory. So guess what? Getting results. And it's been kind of fun to watch. And Mike, you may want to shout out on a couple of these too. But I mean, we've had some grant applications. We're not going to name any names because we're in the middle. But we had one grant application come in and they actually did 5 different priority areas, you know, and that's great because they're scoring more grant points. And that's exactly what we wanted to occur is getting those done first. But one of the things that I really want you all to pay attention to, and this is what we're so proud of, is up in the right-hand corner, 60,315 locations. That is all that's left. And if you all know, there's about 2.5 million residential households in the state of South Carolina, and we are less than 50,000 residential households as of February 12th. And we're less than, you know, a little bit over 10,000 business locations left. So that's the game we're playing right now, is chasing dots. We're not funding census blocks. We're not funding counties. We're actually funding street addresses. And when we do a grant award, we're actually funding a collection of dots. And we're very precise. Sometimes it drives us crazy, quite honestly, chasing these dots and getting them right. In fact, it always drives us crazy. We have this discussion on a daily basis. But that's the goal we're in. And I just want to share, you know, by comparison, North Carolina and Georgia both have well over 200,000 remaining locations. So we're doing extraordinarily well getting this state resolved. And we're working through our ARPA 3.0. We're going to try, we're working hard. Our internal goal is to get all of these grant awards done by June 30th. Have all of our $400 million committed from the General Assembly. This is kind of a fun thing. Mike, I think we've got a couple minutes. If you want to demo the managed projects, you know, our map, you want to show that off? Or
Sure. Yeah, no, I can take them through a little. I love how you just threw me in the spot there. I'm just gonna run with it. Let's do it. All right. So
see, if this is how you know if he really knows what he's doing.
I love that.
Great, yeah.
But you're gonna have to unshare for me to start sharing. There we go. All right. So let's go ahead and jump in.
And as somebody who's worked in many states, I can tell you this is one of the best tools I have seen. So a great shout out to the South Carolina Broadband Office and everything you guys have done here with that. This is an amazing tool. Great job.
Mike's head is growing as you're talking, Chris.
Really appreciate that. Appreciate the love. It has everything to do with the team, though. Very fortunate to be surrounded by some pretty awesome folks, and you know, they prove it out each and every day. So I'm here at SC Digital Drive under the stakeholders tab. You go down in here, and of course, you guys have seen this, these story maps, what have you, descriptors that, you know, explain the difference between adoption, use, and access. But right here is our investments map. And what we've done is we've tried to make this a one-stop shop so everyone can actually see what's going on. Go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Here in the state, right? So all of the funding that Jim has referred to here, I'm gonna hide that window, there we go. Everything that Jim has referred to in terms of funding, it all plays out here. Historically, this was information that would have been available. You'd had to go to the individual page of the grant program, but now we've kind of stuck it all in one place, and we can go ahead and zoom in. We can search by address. If I left mouse click on any of these features, I get details. So I can find out a little bit more about the project. When's it start? When's it end? What's the name? And depending on the grant program, we have additional information available. For example, with rural broadband, didn't have as much detail, but as we've gone forward, like rural broadband here, you can see it's a little bit of information, but if we start to poke around and look at some of the other projects, CARES 2, the same deal, it'll be limited. But if we get into some of the other grant programs, and of course, we've got everything laid out by grant program. So if I wanted to look at just CPF, here's all the CPF projects we funded. So if I left mouse click on any of them, I get a lot more detail. Project summary, the funding amount, the dates, obviously really critical. And if you wanted additional information, you can click on the actual web app. That's the original list of projects that we funded. to get additional detail, right, in terms of awards, that sort of thing. So a lot of information here. It is mobile friendly, so you can run this off your mobile device, off your smart device. And yeah, it's out here for everyone to interact with. You can consume this also as a map service. So anyone that would want to throw this in their own GIS, they can do so pretty quickly. So again, this is out here. I encourage you guys to play with it, interact with it, take a look at, at areas that are of interest to you. So we can also change the base map. There's all kinds of fun stuff we can do here. Add data. Got an additional data you want to put in here, you can. You can add your own data to the map session if you'd like to. So that is that's a crash course right there. Again, it's at scdigitaldrive.org, and encourage you guys to interact with it, play with it. A lot of good information there.
There you go. Now you know why he's on the team. Thank you, Mike. And see that it's kind of fun just catch them off guard, totally unplanned, unscripted, and there you go. 1, 2, 3, go. But that's what this is all about, is, as much transparency as we can, sharing this out with the state and making everybody aware of what we're up to. Now, craziness, here's when we get back to our land of crazy. We have 2, I like to say, freight trains on the tracks at the same time. We are working hard. The blue bars we're working our way through the American Rescue Plan dollars, trying to get that done. You see, we have a goal of June 30 to have all of the American Rescue Plan dollars committed. And we are on track for that. I feel very optimistic that we're going to hit that. It's mainly whether our ISPs can sign their documents on time or not, right, Mike? Chris, that's coming at you, bud. And then, but then also the other freight train that we need to just, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about that today, but we are in the middle of this BEAD program, trying to get the additional $546 million is this whole federal approval process. I'll speak to that in a minute. It's called the BEAD program, but we're working through all of the back and forth with NTIA to get this sucker approved. It's a huge amount of work. On top of the ARPA stuff, you can see how crazy we are. So that's really the only point I wanted to make with this slide for you guys, is just the land of crazy in trying to get this done. But as we leap into 2025, we're going to be doing sub-grantee selection. And I guess the overarching point I make with BEAD is we are chasing dots to get to 0. The goal is to get internet for everybody. And that means every single dot has to have some sort of investment sitting on top of it before we're done. It's a lot of work. It's extremely technical. And, when you start getting down to the last few dots, you have all of these special things happening. We have very unique geographic features. It's a nice way of saying we have private islands. We have houses on the side of mountains. We have homes on the other side of 6 railroad crossings. We have all of these special things which are very, very challenging. And so as we, winnow it down to the final few dots, it's going to take a lot of collaboration to get it done, but we will. Mike, anything you wanted to add to that, just time-wise? We'll come back to this in a second. A little more about BEAD, and then I'm going to wrap up my piece of this program in a second. Just some overview things, some quick updates. Again, the overall BEAD and allocation for the state. So we learned on June 26th of 2023, we learned that the state of South Carolina was getting $551.5 million total dollars. They've already given us $5 million for planning money. So that's where I'm talking about 546. The remaining amount of money, by federal law, we are required to get all homes and businesses done first, and community anchor institutions, before we do anything else. We can't even conceive of anything else. But the good news is that it's probably not going to cost $551 million to do the remaining homes. So we're going to have some amount of money for non-deployment stuff. And those are really the 2 swim lanes in the BEAD program. There's broadband deployment, and then there's non-deployment. There's a whole set of really cool stuff we can do once homes are done. But that is job number 1, and we really can't do it. So again, huge announcement. On March 22nd, just a couple weeks ago, we got approval for volume 1 of the BEAD program. We got that formal, we've been working on that since December 12th, I believe. So December 12th, 2023, we applied. Mike, I think we went through 6 different rounds of feedback, and the feds call it curing. But we got approved on March 22nd, which means we are officially beginning our BEAD Challenge program next Monday. And Anna, shout out, and Madeline and everybody else. The challenge program is important. The challenge program is about getting our set of dots correct for the BEAD program. What are the remaining dots? So the folks that are allowed to participate are internet service providers, any unit of local government, which you guys would count as, and all of your member counties would count as units of local government, and also nonprofit institutions. So, you know, getting in and navigating the dots and making sure we have the dots right, that's what this challenge process is all about. Now, I'm going to call this out. Rebecca, you may have some need to participate in this as well. But the challenge will end on May 15th. So really between April 15th, I think, is it May 14th or 15th? For the challenge, May 14th it ends. That's your time to challenge the dots. Say this is right or wrong. I'm short-circuiting this a lot, but you've only got 30 days, and then the outcome of this is a set of dots that we are able to use for funding for the BEAD program. So this is a really important time in South Carolina history, and we're going to want to get that correct. But and then volume 2, totally separate approval process. To be clear, we don't have any extra money right now for broadband infrastructure. Volume 2 has to be approved for any dollars to be freed up. But that's going to take another couple months, we are certain. But volume 1, big deal getting that piece done. And but volume 2 is going to be at a later date. So there's probably a lot more details, but I'm not going to get into all the weeds on this thing. Is there anything you're going to talk about right now?
I guess the one thing would be to just make sure that we're buying you, Anna, and Madeline as well, and Eric Woods also, that we're going to want to message back out one more time about registering and really just try to saturate, you know, everyone's inboxes to get them to participate. It's important.
We're trying, and we've presented at the annual conferences. You all, this is really important for the state of South Carolina. Historically, this is a once in our lifetimes opportunity to get this right. Can't understate that enough. We will never have this amount of money for broadband investment ever again. It's a once in the United States history. If we don't get this right, shame on us. So lean in on it. Rebecca, anybody you can lean in on your end to help us chase the dots and get this right, we'll be grateful for that. We're trying to get everybody in. So really quickly, just key themes on BEAD. We're working so hard on the American Rescue Plan dollars because that sets the starting line for the BEAD program. Every home that we can take off the map in ARPA comes off the map for BEAD, which is a big deal because, you know, every day counts. Getting a home connected one day sooner. If we can do it with ARPA, we want to do that. We are working, Anna, I want you to know, working very closely with the counties. Some counties still have remaining ARPA dollars, and we're working directly with county administrators to get those committed. They have to be done by May 15th or stop. We're working on, you know, once we get into BEAD, we're going to have zip code project areas. We talked about our challenge, which is going on now. We are going to have some, Rebecca, this is a special shout out for you and for others. We have, you know, once we get some dollars approved, we have, as part of our budget strategically, we have over 150 apprentices. And this is going to be some money, and we're envisioning folks like Charter and AT&T and our electric co-ops and others hiring staff members, full-time staff members. They have to be broadband related, not necessarily construction, but could be GIS talent going to work in these offices, could be really business skills from all the compliance side and the federal stuff. But there's a big opportunity once we can free up these dollars for apprentices. And community anchor institutions, again, Rebecca, every school and library counts as a community anchor institution. So every physical building that does not have access to 1 gigabit symmetric has a shot now to get BEAD money. And that's why leaning in hard, especially on community anchors, is a really, it's a once in our lifetimes ability to do this, to get it right. Okay, so I'm going to finish. Tom, you're on the on-deck circle right now. I'm going to finish pretty quickly on this, but I want to talk about construction dashboard. This is a new technology we've been kicking around. This is an internal tool, but I'll walk into this a little bit. The vision for this construction dashboard was for us to be able to sit at our desk, broadband office selfishly, and see what activated last week, what got done. And this goes back to at least my personal experience. I know Cedric and some others. And if you've ever been into a control room for a factory, and you see that network operations center where, I back in my day, if a motor was running, it was green. If a motor was off, it was red. If a motor was over temperature, it flashed red at you. So that was kind of the idea: is how could we have a dashboard that we could use in the broadband office to do that? Oh, Bernie, any question?
Yeah, it was way back when you were showing the map. If there are people in communities, and of course that's where we are, in communities that are saying they don't have access to broadband, or they don't have good broadband access, and especially in our rural areas, how can we best inform and educate them or direct them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's a couple things you can do. One is, and I'm going to remind everybody, we get really happy when we place an investment on an area and we kind of move on. But I want to remind everyone that construction takes time. So once we place an investment, some of those projects are going to take 2 years. So a couple of things that we can share. One is a individual consumer can register on the I Need Internet survey, Bernie. It's on SE Digital Drive, and they can go out there and say, I need internet. But probably before they do that, they should go to the federal broadband map, and they should check to see what's available at their home right now. In fact, Mike, would you be willing to navigate that real quick?
Sure.
Well, Bernie, I'm going to give everybody a little bit of a primer on how to navigate the federal broadband map. Might be useful.
Get to the right page. I think I have. All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, and where's starting at the beginning? This is on what site?
I'm sorry, Bernie. Go ahead. Say that again.
I said start from the beginning. This is on what site? Is this on also regular staff site, or is it a different site?
This is actually through the Federal Communications Commission. So this is a web application that's nationwide. It's the place you can go to get the disposition of any location in the nation, including U.S. territories. And when you go to this page, first thing you do is type in an address. So I'm just going to type in 1401 Main Street. And it'll start to automatically populate some addresses for you. You click on the address, and then what it's going to do is it's going to zoom you into the dots, right? And sometimes you have to come in and actually left mouse click the dot. When I click on the right-hand side, I get a list of providers that are currently stating to the federal government that they provide access to said address, right? There's a dot theoretically for every structure in the nation. So end users can use this in a couple different ways. They can actually challenge the service that is essentially being reported by an ISP. They can challenge the location of a dot. Let's say the dot's just missing. It's not on top of my house. there's a lot of functionality here the federal government has put out that everyone as citizens can interact with. So when someone calls our consumer services department here at the Office of Regulatory Staff, and it has to do with broadband, this is the first place they go. They're going to look at the address. They're going to see what providers currently provide access, because oftentimes consumers don't know. So this is a great first stop, right? Now, if we went into this and we saw that, you know what, I don't have anybody that can provide cable or fast internet, right? Let's say Charter could not provide it, and this is what I got left, right? And you can see that there's some business service here as well. What you would then want to do is you would want to maybe take a look at that other web application, the one that we have, where we've gone and we've said, hey, we've made investments in this area. So playing back and forth across these two applications would give you the greatest intel in terms of what's going on. What we expect oftentimes, Bernie, is that, you know, consumers just don't know. So when they reach out and they contact our consumer services department, these are the apps they're going to, right? They're starting with the federal app, they pivot over to the funding app, and then based on what they learn about that location, they try to advise the consumer accordingly. And there's a great video actually on how to use this application, how to file a challenge. I believe we've linked that to our website on the ORS webpage as well. But they're the tools and the resources we have that allows us to pretty quickly come in and understand what the disposition is of any location here in the state.
And Bernie, thank you for bringing that up, because that's, you know, one of the challenges of where we are right now is quite simply having a resident understand that in some cases, you know, they may have had one provider for 40 years at their house. It's a known, trusted provider brand name. But guess what? They have to cancel that service, and they have to switch to a different provider, maybe after 40 years, because until they change the technology in their home, until they move from, especially if they're on DSL service, if they are on DSL and they don't switch, they're never going to get faster. It's just that simple. So we are trying to figure out how. That's one of the reasons these awareness events are so important. Is we need the community to understand these residents have to switch technologies. They have to bring fiber or cable into their home to ever make a change. And that's why it's such a big deal. But thank you for bringing that up.
And Mike is adding the links to the chat so you guys have access to it to be able to get back to it. And I think Tom would agree that reaching out to our consumer service office would probably be a great first step. They'll be glad to walk you through getting to those websites as well.
Yep, individual consumers. Okay, I'm going to finish this up real quick, and then I'll pass it over to Tom and Mary Dell. So construction dashboard, again, was just an idea to give us some real-time intelligence of what's going on in the state. I'll go through this quickly. You get the idea fast. There's an open source tool called H3, which breaks up the whole world into hexagons. And it allows us to provide an analysis in a standard size. And you can see in the left-hand side, it has different resolutions. You know, the big ones, the blues that I'm currently showing, these are almost 9,000 acres in size. They're big. But down at the smaller level, the resolution 9, they're 26,000 acres in size. So you can see they're nested within each other. So in the broadband office, what it provides us with is the ability to evaluate a project at a 26-acre morsel to see whether it's live or not. And here's the way it plays out. This is actual project in Allendale County, and this is you can see the little hexagons laying on top of Allendale County. And then we use our UPLA data. Some of you know about our speed tests. And here's how it flows in on a nightly basis. We can actually see the state of South Carolina getting constructed as we speak. You can see real-time activity coming in on that. Here's a project in Oconee County. You can watch this. This is every week-by-week progression. Just sitting at our desk, watching this happen. And you can see how valuable it is for us. I mean, by itself, this doesn't get the job done from our intelligence. There's a lot of other things, but this certainly does give us comfort that this network is coming to life, and you can see what an extraordinary job this one provider's doing. But this data, you can see this is from yesterday. This is a map that was rendered yesterday based on stuff end of the day Sunday. So this is real-time intelligence for this project in Oconee County. And when you zoom in, really deep, we actually have a timestamp. We know when that hexagon went live, date and time, number of users, and the actual speeds that are performing within that hexagon. Here's
The ISP is providing that to you.
no. It comes from, that's what's really cool, is it's coming from the consumers. When they run Ookla speed tests on their mobile phone, that's how we're getting that data. So this is verification, really, that the consumer is live in that area and functioning. Here's another project area quickly. This is actually Allendale, Bamberg, and Hampton County. You can see those segments lighting up. This project will finish up at the end of the year. So again, you can see how cool it is from our perspective to get some intelligence on that. Okay, I'm done. Tom, I'm happy to drive the slides for you, but I'm gonna turn off my camera and pass the mic officially to you.
Yep. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, I appreciate you driving the slides for me. Good morning, everybody. I know there are a couple of people that joined us late. Just to reintroduce myself, I'm Tom Allen. I'm with the Office of Regulatory Staff. When we last met in January as the Broadband Advisory Council, Leah Cuthbertson, who's no longer with our office, gave an in-depth look at our digital equity plan. And we also started to talk about, now that the infrastructure office can see the end of the runway with the monies, the federal monies that are coming in, we understood that there's a need to keep the Broadband Advisory Council moving on, but to repurpose it a little bit. So today I'm gonna give everybody a quick overview of our digital opportunity plan. And then I'm gonna go a little bit more in depth of our transition plan to take the BBAC from focusing on infrastructure to focusing on digital equity. The Digital Opportunity Office, Digital Opportunity Department, as we're calling it at ORS, rested at the Department of Administration until October 1 of last year. At that time, the governor's office thought it best to move the Digital Opportunity Department to ORS, but so that it could work hand in hand with the broadband office, particularly in all things digital equity, but also in terms of BEAD and the non-deployment uses. And so we established a vision for the department, and that was for all South Carolinians to have access to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet, and also to have the skills to benefit from this technology. So Jim and Mike and Cedric and their group are pushing that infrastructure, particularly into rural areas, but those folks are becoming exposed to new technology in some cases, and they don't know how to use it. So one of the primary roles of the Digital Opportunity Department is to work with other state agencies, nonprofits, local agencies, NGOs, to teach the people in South Carolina the skills to be successful in the digital world. Next slide, Jim. And the way we accomplished this was by putting together a plan. During the months of November, we actually inherited a pretty good framework from the Department of Administration on October 1, but used the months of October, November, and December to further refine the plan. And this plan has to be submitted to the NTIA, the National Telecommunications Information Administration, and they have to approve it. And once they approve it, we're eligible to receive some additional funding. So we went through the process of putting the plan together. We put it up for public comment on December 12th. It closed in mid-January. And then in February, we filed this plan with the NTIA. Next slide, Jim. The NTIA, in its notice of funding, notice of opportunity for funding, mandated that there were several specific populations that that each state had to address. And let me pause. If I seem distracted, it's because I am. I'm at a conference in Greenville, and it's break time, and there's people walking in and out of the room. So my apologies if there's extra noise here. We had to focus on certain covered populations. That includes low-income individuals. That's folks that are 150% or below the poverty level. Aging individuals. Those are folks that are 60 years and older. Racial and ethnic minorities. Rural residents, veterans, individuals with disabilities. That includes both developmental and physical disabilities. Also, folks with language barrier. That includes people that speak English as a second language, but also those folks that may have a speech or hearing impairment or a learning impairment. And also incarcerated individuals, to include those that are formerly incarcerated. So those folks you can imagine that may have been in prison, for 15 or 20 years, when they're coming out into the world in terms of technology is much different. We developed 5 broad goals, and you can see those across the board. Broadband affordability. We want to make sure everybody in South Carolina can afford broadband. Online accessibility and inclusivity, so that if they can't afford it, that they're using it. Goal 3 is digital literacy, allowing those folks to have the skills to use the technology. Online privacy and cybersecurity. Susie alluded to this a little bit earlier. We're going to make a big push in that beginning in the fall with Cybersecurity Week. And then goal 5, device availability and affordability. One thing that I've been talking about is there are some very small computer, device loaner programs in South Carolina. I think those need to end. We need to find a way to make the actual purchase of devices affordable and not just give folks loaners throughout the state of South Carolina. So those are the primary goals for our digital equity plan. And here's our timeline. I told you that we received the office in 2023. We submitted our plan for public comment and took those public comments, incorporated them into the plan, and sent that final plan to the NTIA in February. Throughout the month of March, the NTIA asked us to make a few changes. We made those in the month of March, and here we are in April, ready to implement the plan. As a broad timeline, the beginning for the funding is from, or the program implementation is from 2024 to 2029. And so we're beginning as soon as we're officially approved, our digital equity plan is officially approved by the NTIA, we'll be in that implementation period. Next slide, please, Jim. So what are we doing now while we're waiting for our plan to be approved? Number one, we're telling everybody we can about the plan. That's one reason I wanted to be on this the call today and do a short presentation. We've been on the road. I'm here in Greenville. I'm gonna do a short presentation on our digital equity plan tomorrow. We've been all throughout our rural areas. Mary Dale and I have been to Barnwell and Bamberg and Estill and probably 9 times in the last 3 weeks to make sure that folks know about this plan and what's coming in front of us. We've also been creating materials for folks to share so that they'll have toolkits when we begin these implementation programs. We can share those with community members. And of course, I mentioned Cybersecurity Week in October 2024. We've had some folks help us with that. Mary Dale's been the lead on that. We're going to roll out a program called Secure SC, and we'll work with our stakeholders to provide toolkits so that they can spread the word of how to operate safely using the technology. Of course, we all know, and I mentioned in front of the Education Oversight Committee yesterday, we all have a grandmother or an aunt or an uncle that responded to the email from the Nigerian prince. And that's what we don't want folks to do in South Carolina. So we're going to initiate some of those programs to make sure people are safe online. On March 29th, the NTIA produced this NOFO for the capacity grant. And with that, South Carolina will be eligible for over $12 million in this upcoming performance period. And the way Right now, we believe that'll be structured as we're going to provide sub-grants to community groups to start meeting those 5 goals of the plan. Now, we won't have the guidance for how that's going to work has not been produced by the NTIA, and as the month of April and May, we'll get more information from them and know exactly how our granting program will need to be structured. And then, of course, really one of the linchpin of the implementation of digital opportunity in South Carolina is this council, the Broadband Advisory Council. So next slide, please, Jim. In terms of what we're doing here, as part of these next steps, we're identifying leaders from covered populations. Remember those 8 groups, and we're engaging those to educate them about the plan, but also about the Broadband Advisory Council. And we're identifying effective tools and outreach strategies to implement, for instance, surveys and community meetings and social media. And we're, of course, creating and executing a strategic outreach and engagement plan to make sure that we can measure the increase in digital literacy. So what does this mean, to next slide, Jim, to the Broadband Advisory Council? Well, we've got all these groups converging, just like on a cloverleaf of an interstate. And we need to make sure, number one, that these folks are educated about the goals of digital opportunity, but also that we're finding the right people to help us execute the plans at the grassroots level. Next slide, Jim. And so we've put together, with the help of a consultant, a transition plan for the Broadband Advisory Council. That transition is for the council to move more towards digital opportunity and less towards infrastructure. Now, that means we need a wide swath of industry, business, community leaders, and even local, state government, as well as NGOs. So number one, we've got to focus change, right? We got to adjust that focus for the BBAC to digital opportunity. And then we've got to really become engaged, that step 2, with those covered population stakeholders. Next slide, please, Jim. And I mentioned our covered populations. If you go to our website, you can find the description and our plans for those covered populations in the digital equity plan. And we've got them, of course, listed there in the appropriate sections that they can be found. Next slide, Jim. So beginning on July 1st, the Broadband Advisory Council is going to include 2 distinct groups. Number one are the BBAC members, and those members are going to be the lead for each covered population. In other words, the incarcerated individuals, the natural BBAC member, lead member for that would be the Department of Corrections. Then we're going to have consulting members, and those consulting members will be those additional groups that serve those covered populations that will not be formal members of the committee, but will act to consult and guide with the implementation strategies. And we will develop these subcommittees for the implementation of those strategies. Next slide, Jim. So the org chart will kind of look like this. The ORS will be the administrative, will run from the administrative side, all the operations of the BBAC, but we'll also have a Broadband Advisory Committee chair, a chair-elect, an immediate past chair, and then we'll have our BBAC members and various committees and subcommittees, as well as the consulting members and various subcommittees and committees for the consulting members as well. Next slide, Jim. Our structure, our members are going to be on the council for 2 years, and then 1-year terms for our leadership positions. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we want that cross section of special populations and also by region and their expertise. The BBAC will always have an ORS staff member as part of the BBAC. Initially, I will serve as the chair, and Anna, congratulations. Effective July 1, you are the past chair and you can quit herding cats. Congratulations to you. So Anna, we'll ask you to serve as the immediate past chair in advisory capacity to lean on your expertise over these last couple of years in running the council. And Jim, of course, is a part of that as well. And then we will elect a chair-elect as well. And that chair-elect will be the new chair beginning in 2025. Next slide, Jim. We're going to change our meeting schedule a little bit. Thanks, right there. We want to push our meetings. I believe right now they're on a quarterly basis in January, April, July, and then again in October. We want to, or I guess it was October. Yeah, we want to push those back a little bit to be a little bit more friendly to folks' schedule. July is always very difficult for folks to meet with vacations. So we're going to move our first formal meeting to August of 2024. In the meantime, we're going to have a May and June organizational meeting to really educate our new members and to set goals and make sure that everybody's on board with the mission. So there you see a kind of a tentative meeting schedule that we want to push back a month or so to make it a little bit easier for folks' schedules. Also, the biggest difference, we're going to want to meet in person. This is going to be a working group in which folks are tasked with executing a mission. So we find it very important to meet face-to-face. So we're going to meet face-to-face and rotate in various areas throughout the counties, throughout the state. We'll probably have some, webinar situations where we can provide updates to each other, but we want to have full committee meetings in person so that we can work on strategies to implement our digital equity plan. Next slide, Jim. And so the purpose, of course, is going to be, is going to take on many facets. Number one, we want the input of our members and the insights that they provide from serving their population. We know that these folks are the expert on the populations that they're serving, and ORS is not. So having them at the table will be very important. We're also going to use these committee members, full members, to conduct periodic surveys and to share best practices. Two of the big things that we want to do early on is begin the process of creating or even supporting in those areas that exist mobile computing labs. And also there's several train the trainer digital navigator programs out there. We think those two things are very important to implement early on in our program so that we can provide everybody in the state the necessary resources. Next slide, Jim. Here are several of the things, several of the items and the implementation strategies that we have mentioned in our plan. Of course, I mentioned earlier about the digital device refurbishing program and the ability to get devices in everybody's hands in South Carolina. If you think through it, it's great to have access and it's great to have affordable internet, but if you don't have a device to use it on, it becomes meaningless. So that's a primary mission early on is to get those device refurbishing and low-cost programs in place. I mentioned cybersecurity earlier, October 2024, Secure SC. We also need to begin the work with our broadband office of aligning those BEAD goals and strategies with the digital equity plan, and we've already started much of that. Next slide, Jim. And so we laid out some strategies. Number one is where we're at right now, awareness. We're getting the word out that the Broadband Advisory Committee is transitioning, and we're also traveling throughout the state to talk about our plan. We want to continue to build those partnerships and coalitions with folks like you that are on the call, but also the folks that live in your world. We want to make them a part of this working group as well. And we're always interested in those folks that can give us data and analytics. At the end of the day, we're going to be measured by the NTIA on the improvements that we make in the state, so we've got to be able to gather data. We also want to make sure that we're layering these digital inclusion programs with other programs that exist. Digital inclusion, of course, can't stand alone. It can't be an independent program. It's got to be weaved in with all of these other improvements and infrastructure missions that we have going out in the state. And of course, we want to make sure that this is an inclusive community. We, of course, are going to serve those 8 populations throughout the state, but this really is a South Carolina wide project in which we want to incorporate all the citizens of South Carolina into growing so that we can better have a better economic environment and atmosphere in South Carolina. In conclusion, just wrapping up, next slide, Jim, you can really skip ahead. You can, of course, in development is the digital opportunity webpage. It's really thin right now, but we've got a couple of important things right there. If you have not viewed our plan, please go take a look at the digital equity plan that can be found on our website. The second important thing on our webpage is you have the ability to subscribe to our digital opportunity newsletter that comes out monthly that will inform folks of not only all the things that the Broadband Advisory Council is doing, but also funding opportunities that will be available in the future. And with that in mind, there's my contact information for those folks who don't know me, and I'll open it up to any questions. Well, let me pause first, and I'm going to toss it to Mary Dale. Mary Dale, did I miss anything?
No, all good.
Thanks, Mary Dale. Now I'll open it up to questions should anybody have any.
Yeah, I've got a quick question, and
Sure,
you
Brian.
give an example of a member of the advisory council, for example, representing the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated target group, and you mentioned the Department of Corrections would be that representative.
Perhaps, yes.
Okay, well, this is where I think better insight could be provided. There's a community group called Soteria, headed by Jerry Blasingame, who's someone that's formerly incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
He has a very successful organization in Greenville. I think insight from someone like him on broadband access, all respect to the Department of Corrections, but if you're dealing with people that are formerly incarcerated, trying to re-engage the community, returning citizens and so forth, someone that's on the ground that does that work every day can add better insight, I think, than the Department of Corrections. So, so it's that kind of voice, I guess I'm wondering, how does that voice get to the advisory council?
Yeah, Bernie, I appreciate that. First, let me address the Department of Corrections and the incarcerated individuals. We are structuring the Broadband Advisory Council. It's not going to be a one-for-one government agency. In other words, the lead for each of those covered populations certainly by no means is going to be a government agency. I mean, they exist to serve those populations already. I was just using them as a quick and easy example. We actually have a matrix that Mary Dell has put together that has, I don't know if it quite has hundreds, but it has at least dozens of organizations on it. And, basically we're keeping track of those organizations and what parts of the states, what populations they serve, so that we can find that ideal person, that ideal group to represent. But we've also, the way we're structuring is the council will have those lead members, but those consulting members are also going to be, their service will be available for the committee as well. I'll be frank with you, Bernie. Sometimes it's easier. It is very difficult for some of these nonprofits and NGOs because of the limited resources to be able to do some of the administrative work that might be required from this council. So our thoughts are to find some of those either more fully developed nonprofits or NGOs, or maybe even state agencies that can handle the administrative burden of the Broadband Advisory Council, whereas those folks, as you mentioned the group earlier, can be one of those consulting members where they're actually on the ground doing the work. Does that make sense? Let me give you an example from another world that I used to be in and no longer. When I was doing pipeline, we developed a program to teach safety to firefighters. Well, we developed it with the pipeline operators. Well, these pipeline operators, their day job was to go deliver product to the end user, right? They didn't have time to stop and create a curriculum for the delivery to the firefighters. They didn't have time to schedule the classes. I, as a public servant, had that time to do those things. So I took on the administrative burden so that those pipeline operators could actually go deliver the content. Does that make sense?
Well, and what it does, and what you're telling me in the new role of the advisory council, and you did say it's a working group. So it sounds like there's like programs that will be developed by members of the advisory council.
Absolutely.
Which is kind of like a second job that they'll have.
Yeah, that's why we want to take away some of the administrative burden from those folks, because it would be like a second job.
Well, I'll just ask because I understand that you want to have folk on the council that can fulfill that administrative role. But I would, and it sounds like you're making room through the consulting groups to have that voice on the ground of how this digital equity and digital opportunity is being implemented. But I'd really encourage you to lean in on that level of advice, because as Jim said earlier, this is a once in generation opportunity. And if it's not done right, you're still going to have population groups that are going to be left out and are not going to be served best. And this opportunity will miss them. So,
yeah.
And I applaud, everything that's been laid out, especially as you've identified those target populations, but definitely being able to get the voice from constituents who serve on the ground every day those target populations.
Thanks, Bernie. And the star of the show right now is in the group shot, Mary Dell. She lives in that world, and that's why we brought her on board, because she doesn't deal with government. She deals with a lot of those, the nonprofits and NGOs, and she knows that world much better than I do, and I trust her fully. So she knows a lot of those folks probably that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? All right, thank you. Feel free, anybody that needs to reach out to me, I'll be happy to talk with you offline. So with that in mind, Jim, I'll toss it back to you.
Thanks, Tom. And we have just a couple minutes left. We're finishing up right on time, but I would like to offer our BBAC members a chance to give an update from your world if you want to take a couple minutes. Does anybody, Bernie, Rebecca, anybody have something you want to share with the group?
I'll just say broadly, we will have maybe some opportunities for the digital opportunity plan to be presented to some of our constituents, and would like to talk with you about ways to share that information.
Bernie, I believe I'm scheduled with something with your folks in, I want to say May, if I'm not mistaken.
Could very well be.
Yep.
Awesome.
And I will just say we actually have a ton of initiatives going on over here at the Department of Education. And first, among many of them, I am just thinking very much we're rolling out a Hope Network, which is really catered towards helping struggling districts and rural districts with high quality instructional materials, professional development, administrative support to offices, to the finance departments, and one key piece of that is shared services, where our CIO's office actually helps provide IT services and infrastructure to districts that are having difficulty or just have lack personnel or infrastructure to support that. So I'm actually really excited to work more to help align that program with some of the things that we talked about here today. I think that will be a wonderful fit, and I look forward to a lot more conversations with you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Susie, anything?
Perhaps just mention that with support from the governor's office and in partnership with the South Carolina Department of Employment and Workforce, we are currently building out a heat map inventory as well as a career pathway mapping tool for select EV-related occupations. Obviously, there's a heavy tech adjacent component here in building out the talent into the future, particularly given all of the electrification related record economic announcements from the state. So specifically, those are going to be industrial engineer, automotive service technician, logistician, but also software developer. So to be a one-stop go-to place where all that information will be housed.
I'll just quickly mention my line about this tournament. Tom, we this summer we offer institute government classes, and one of our advanced courses is going to be on technology trends. So this Cyber SC program is something that I think would really be a great addition to that panel discussion. So I'll reach out to you guys offline with a date and figure out who is best suited to be part of that conversation. I think it would be great to start planting seeds. We've got a couple people already plugged in, but I'll work with you guys on logistics for that. And then I want to make sure that our counties have what they need, as I'm sure Eric would, for the municipalities with this challenge process that's getting ready to happen. What is like a concise message? What are the resources or links they need to make sure they're ready? We want to make sure we get that out because, as you said, this is our chance to get ready. So we'll coordinate on those logistics.
Yeah, we can give you some details before you leave on that for sure. Yeah. Let me see who won this. Did you get everybody? I think so. Well, guess what? We're finishing on time. 2 minutes. In fact, everybody got 2 minutes to spare. So I'm gonna conclude. Obviously this is my last official one as a co-chair. So Anna, thank you for being along for the ride and the whole support. And then Tom, the baton is officially been passed. So I know you can carry it very well from here.
Whoa, Jim, you have until June 30th.
Good deal. Thank you all. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you all so much.